You are listening to Digging In Podcast, presented by Rooted Wealth Advisors.
Hey everybody, welcome into another episode of the Digging In Podcast. I'm your host, Kinch Kelly, helping you get those questions answered to and through retirement. Today I'm joined by international jet setter himself, Mr. Zach Gray.
What are you talking about?
Oh man, you're all over
New
the
York
place.
Jets?
All over
Rodgers
the place.
is down.
Whoa.
I mean, my goodness.
Well, we are not bringing
I tell you
Rodgers
what,
into
your
this
Chiefs got off to a rocky start too.
Oh
but
man. Do we need to talk about the Bears?
The Bears.
They have a new owner.
The Bears.
They have a new owner.
Ownership changed hands.
Jordan Love.
I wonder what the taxes were on that. That investment can't be worth much right now. Anyway.
Oh my goodness.
Before I start crying, let's change the subject.
That is just that is one wild way to take it. No, man, you've been all over the place. You've been climbing mountains. You've been taking your kids to school. You've been helping get a new office off the ground in Denver. You've been racking up the frequent flyer miles. That's for sure. So, with all those frequent flyer miles, have you thought about where you're going to live in retirement?
Oh boy. No. Well, I think a lot of it will revolve around kiddos and family, so forth. But I think I know maybe where you're heading here is where would I want to?
Yeah.
There's a little bit of the reason for Denver being a market that we now serve, and so happy to get that going. Just beautiful out there. So, hey, I would love to flirt with the idea of being out there more at some point in our lives. But you know, you have to think about taxes. We see a lot of folks moving to Tennessee. Hence, we have a satellite office in Brentwood, Tennessee, right outside Nashville. A lot of our clients moving to Florida, Texas, Arizona.
Anywhere but here.
Yeah, anywhere but at our home office here in Illinois. But still amazing folks that we serve here. And, hey, I love, obviously, because we're rooted in family here. But, yeah, I mean, there's all those questions should be running through someone's mind. What does it look like for more of my hard-earned money, estate taxes, all of that? Massive conversation.
Yeah, there's certainly something to be said for being rooted in a place, right? Family, friends, jobs, churches, stuff like that would certainly keep you in an area. But I think I have an interesting perspective, and maybe that's because I've lived in more states than I can count.
Gypsy.
And have just moved around my entire life. But I've also seen some of the benefits of like what that can be and starting new friendships and new places and new jobs and what could be the benefit of potentially retiring in one of these places that maybe has a little more savings than their current state or situation, right? You brought up Tennessee. Great situation because there's no state income tax, right?
Yep, none there. And also good on the estate side as well. Just had a conversation literally this morning that we're recording with a client working through an estate plan in Minnesota. Even a lower threshold in Minnesota than the roughly $4 million here in Illinois per individual, if properly structured, if not for a spousal couple. So, yeah, and once again, we've talked about this in past shows as well, but the question is, you know, what does it take, you know, to do everything we need to do, pay all the bills, make sure that we live the retirement of our dreams, and all of a sudden those numbers don't get to be too crazy anymore, right? I mean, to think of, an estate that's worth, say, $3 million in my little example from the phone call, boy, it's just not that absurd of a number, right? And all of a sudden now you're 20+% in just a estate tax to the state. So, yeah, all of these things really important to be thinking about.
Well, that combined with you recently completed a beautiful home for your family. So you know all about these intricacies of home building. Now, I'm not going to hire you to build it, but maybe design it or something like that. But you know all the costs associated with something like that. And I ran across an article from the Business Insider that had the top 10 most expensive states to live in. I thought this might be an interesting exercise because we went and answered the top financial Googled topics by state in one of our previous podcasts in season 1. So what do you think are the most expensive states to live in? A few of these surprise me.
Boy, I mean, I naturally drift towards California. It's got to be a top 10 state.
Number 2.
Number 2. I thought that would be a top of the list. After that, I got to think of the Northeast is, I guess, the general region.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's where my mind drifts. Outside of that, I don't know. You probably have me dumbfounded here.
You're not wrong. The Northeast does come in heavy on the list. We got number 3, New Jersey, number 4, Massachusetts, 5, Maryland, 6, Connecticut, 7, New York. So they run quite the gauntlet through there. Number 1, though, think about a place that takes a little more to get goods and services to.
Oh, yeah, something that's more remote than like Hawaii or Alaska.
Hawaii is number 1. Alaska comes in at number 10. 8 is Washington, and number 9, Colorado.
Yeah, and I tell you, that's been even more wild than I expected. Being out there helping folks with their retirement planning. Wild to see how much certain assets have grown in size. Homes, a good example. Hey, we bought this home back in, pick a number, and over the last X amount of years, especially over the last, say, maybe roughly half a dozen, really ratcheted up in terms of its value, which is great. Then the question is okay, if you sell it, where are you going, right? And then obviously that's a conversation that needs to be had, especially for those that say, well, I don't really want to move. My family's here. I love it here. I love to slip away to the mountains. Well, I don't know where the strategy lies there, right? Because, okay, if you sell it, that's wonderful, but you still have to probably live somewhere.
Right.
That's the hope, I guess.
The replacement cost.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, you've seen that change the entire home landscape. You mentioned a home project that my wife and I completed here early summer. And I thought to myself, with these interest rates being so far cry from what my old loan was 2.25%, right? I mean, just kind of kept refinancing it when we were cutting rates. And now all of a sudden, 20, 30-year numbers are 6, 7, 8.5% numbers. I thought, boy, this is bad. We're in a home that we want to sell. Surely this is going to take a long time. Well, there's a lot of people that are staying put. They love that 2.5%, 3% number on their interest, and who can blame them? So supply and demand actually surprised me because we put the home on the market, thought, well, this is going to be a bit of time, and immediately, it was snatched up. Maybe question, boy, if we should have just ratcheted that number up. But I do think it's important for people to understand, the question is, where am I going to go? And frankly, that would be true of no matter even where you land. This is, back to an example we've made before of clients moving to Florida. Some great clients down there. And boy, it's been a struggle for them to even find a place, let alone one they loved. And then, even bidding sight unseen. I mean, just having to get to some fairly drastic measures. Now, I know that that's changed ever so slightly, but most definitely a conversation piece outside of costs, taxes, and so on. Some of it's a little bit of even availability for that matter.
Yeah, and the difference that you talked about in those just couple percentage points over that 18-month window where it really flipped the dial, that's the difference in another home even. The difference between that 2%, 7% number that you're talking about being able to afford. And I know some good friends that I have in Denver, they bought their house in, I think, 2012 for $200 and change. And last time we talked, when I was out there having dinner with them, they could put it on the market and sell it easily for $750K. But he's also in the construction business, so he's not dumb, and he knows about the replacement cost. And he said, Kinch, to to build or to buy the exact same equivalent of what we have, if we want to stay in our price range, we would have to move an hour to an hour and a half outside the city of where we're currently at. And then we're talking about kids changing schools and sports teams and all this other stuff that comes with it. So it really puts everything into an interesting predicament about what you do. Not mentioned on this list, a little farther down, number 16, Illinois. I would have thought for sure it would have been higher than 16.
Yeah, actually, I thought about that. You might have been kind of holding that captive for maybe a top 10 as well. But, the truth of the matter is that, Illinois tax is a huge topic of conversation. It doesn't matter if it's income tax, sales tax, etc. They do give a bit of a break on your retirement funds, right? So, there's actually slight reason to believe that even that little nuance can really improve someone's retirement. And maybe it's more than slight. If you end up in a position where if you're pulling money out of a 401k in a different state and you're taxed on every dollar versus not so much here, it's a definite benefit. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think it's wild to think about that. And I know that some folks that have been intrigued with, maybe getting a lot, maybe even flirting with the idea of building, knowing full well they can get out of their home at a fairly decent value, but it's a real eye-opener on saying, where do I pivot to? To your buddy's example, how can I even afford to build such a thing? And that's the sad news, is we were talking off camera. I don't necessarily know that those numbers, I know, number one, they're not dropping, but number two, that they will drop. And some of that might even be labor. You better tell your buddy to kind of beef up and start, keep going. But
he's hiring.
There you go. Who isn't? Yet another topic for the podcast. But it is important that we realize that and try to strategize that, because there's so many folks that we're blessed to help. And you might be listening today and have a dream of owning a home on the beach, or et cetera, or in a certain location, maybe a warmer climate. Maybe you want to have a second home or condo. And now all of a sudden the question ends up being, is that feasible? We would love to help answer that question.
Well, and you led me right to it, because Bankrate has the flip side of that. Can you guess the most affordable state for senior citizens to live in entering retirement? You got a 1 in 50 shot here.
I know, and you even crossed some off the top 10. So
I know.
I'm trying to do some process of elimination here. I would guess it to be a more, vast open state. But I also know, after doing that mountain climb, that is starting to become the home of the millionaires and billionaires. Mm-hmm. But my mind drifts towards like a Montana, Wyoming, Idaho type of place.
Okay.
Drum roll, please.
Drum roll, please. Is this heaven? No, it's Iowa.
It's Iowa.
That's right, baby. Bankrate lists Iowa as the most affordable state for senior citizens entering retirement. That's the Cyclone State for all of you following along at home. Consumer Affairs ranks Des Moines as the 4th best city in the U.S. to retire in. Number 1 on the list, Lincoln, Nebraska. Number 2, St. Louis, Missouri. Number 3, Champaign, Illinois. And number 4, Des Moines, Iowa. Number 5, El Paso, Texas. Even our friends down in Topeka, Kansas, they got an honorable mention, number 12 on this list.
Wow. Yeah, so a bit surprising. If you love flat ground and cornfields,
hey,
let's go.
That's the place.
That is the place to be. Yeah, you can see that, though, maybe to some extent. And even going back to some of the things that we've been bantering about here, it becomes the question of, real estate, desirable real estate, so on and so forth. Obviously, different industries, mm-hmm. ag, for example, maybe kind of landing, in those respective areas. But, I could see that.
I think it's certainly a matter of choice too. None of these places are on the beach, on a coastline, no place like that. Even El Paso coming down at number 5. Do you want to live that close to the border? So it's one of those questions, is like, why is it affordable? I think a lot of what was taken into consideration for these was, arts, sports, culture, walkability of some of these towns and neighborhoods. So stuff like that. So really cool for my hometown to get on this list, and had to shout that out. And you've made a trip through there showing cattle at some point, though. Iowa State.
I love
Fair,
Iowa.
It's a good time.
Iowa. It's all right. It's yeah. I mean, not a lot to see there. There's more to see there than there is in Nebraska. Okay, you get in the sand hills. You just boy, you just hope you don't break down. Okay, we got different stories. Okay,
that's bad.
But you're right though, and it's interesting too. Like, I mean, I don't take my health as serious as I probably should, but I even listened to a podcast the other day, and it was talking about not only, you mentioned the coast, so it just jumped in my mind. It's like for retirees, climate, air quality. I mean, it got so into the details of science of like ions and water and just the grounding of sand and how that's better than grass. And it made me think, in terms of what that might mean in terms of someone's longevity, happiness. They've made a generalized statement that you don't see many fights at the beach. I thought, hey, there you go. It's on the boardwalk, I guess. But it's...
They've never been to Atlantic City.
That's correct. That is correct. But nonetheless, it's something that is worth giving thought to.
I mean, any thoughts about Champaign being number 3 on this list? You've spent a fair amount of your time in Champaign.
Surprises me.
Right. And why is that?
I think that, Champaign, I love Champaign-Urbana, go Illini. They've got their fair share of some concerns, I think, as well, sadly. But Coach B will hopefully get them rocking and rolling here. But I do, I think that, just because if you look at the industry around that, very heavy in ag, nothing wrong with that. I'm a farm boy. But the question for me ends up being is like, outside of the university, which clearly is a massive player in that town, you start to wonder about what's the diversity, what's the influence, so on and so forth. But still a great place to raise a family from what I've seen. Awesome set of clients down in the Champaign-Urbana area. Even bouncing a little bit further to the west would be like Bloomington, yet another location of ours, but at least has some insurance and so on as far as industry that really influences there. But you have seen a lot of these companies potentially move. I say that tongue in cheek because even right here in kind of our home office location, just up the road, a couple miles in Manteno, we just saw, a big influence from an energy perspective. I haven't dug into all the details, but it looks like it might be some battery power and energy companies that are kind of coming to Central Illinois, which is exciting. So, I think it's easy for us to say, oh, there's a lot of people moving from Illinois. And by the way, I think there's some truth to that. But at the same point, it is nice to kind of look and say, like, well, the university is a really big business for Central Illinois. You bounce over to Bloomington, wow, you've got some of the largest insurance companies, frankly, in the country, that are influencing that community. And even once again, to a little example, just right up the road. So anyway,
I think some of these on the list, I think they intrigue me because some are like college towns or not what you would expect when you're talking about New York, Chicago, LA, Houston type situations. So with the influx and range of college students and them going away or the majority of them going home for the summer or something like that, honestly, that's when it was really fun around Ames, as all the college students were gone and we could go anywhere and do anything without the big crowd. So part of me almost thinks that these are places for snowbirds to come during the summer, almost. Des Moines, Champaign, Lincoln. I don't know. Thoughts?
Could be. I mean, and I think that, you also have to think about the fact of even just cost of living, right? Like, I mean, let's just think about, we're sitting here in our home office, probably midway between, say, Champaign that we've been discussing and Chicago. Massive difference if you want to take the wife out on the town in terms of what that cost is going to set you back.
Oh, yeah.
I remember having this discussion with my sister, and she was debating on different schools. She ended up in the Quad Cities instead of downtown Chicago for her grad school. And just at briefest of length, I remember her discussing the cost of the apartments, the size of the apartments. all of that relevant to our conversations here. I think also in terms of why the influence, why the influx of potentially even cost, it's important.
Well, who can help get you rounded up and get your information so that you have your cost analysis to figure out where you can retire? If you're flirting with the idea of wanting to move to one of these fabulous cities in Iowa.
I would caution against that. No matter where you're living, it is extremely important, though, to have an income plan, having a plan, period. What we find too often many times, and I know I'm guilty of this, life gets busy, and, you just kind of stand back and set some things on autopilot, and sometimes it's a good idea to make sure that your plan is one that's going to be able to be executed. I've recently done this in a few facets, healthcare. I got a little blood test and it's like, these iron levels are high. That's odd. We should probably get that checked out. Had a conversation even with my own attorney the other day. Started out as just a friendly conversation, turned into, have we looked at making sure that the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted? And I guess what I would say when it comes to retirement is you can't have that golden retirement you've always been dreaming about if you don't set some plans in play, if you're not thinking and trying to plot what things might look like in the future, where I want to be, how I want to handle things with children or grandchildren, etc. We talk a lot in the office here. We've been throwing around the word intentional a lot. I plead with you to be intentional about that planning process. Hey, we would love it to be with Rooted Wealth Advisors. We'd love to give you an outside opinion, give you a fiduciary perspective on that. But if you did nothing else than take away a few laughs from this conversation, and just it really sets you in motion to have a conversation with your trusted advisor team, I would hope that that would be of a lot of value in just making sure to get a refresher on that. Of course, if that's a conversation that maybe hasn't happened, we would love to have that conversation.
That's right, we would. I have a whole team of advisors standing by. 815-918-4727. I did not mean for that to come off so like as seen on TV, but it really did.
They should be working.
Kind of feel, yeah. They're waiting by the phone for you to call now. No, in all seriousness, we would love to help out in any way we can. So feel free to give us a call. And until next time, keep digging in.
This was Digging In Podcast, presented by Rooted Wealth Advisors.